Well, two major stories are breaking today, and together they ask a question that the founders feared most. What happens when the people's voice is ignored? Not by accident, but by design. First, the clock is ticking in Washington. At 12:01 a.m. on Wednesday, the federal government could shut down. Again. President Trump has summoned congressional leaders to try to strike a deal, but instead of a short-term pause, the White House Budget Office has told agencies to consider RIF plans, reduction in force notices, tied to the shutdown. That means agencies are preparing not just for furloughs, but potential permanent job cuts if funding doesn't resume. That's a significant departure from past shutdown practice, and it raises an old constitutional problem. Under Article 1 of the Constitution, only Congress can spend money. James Madison called that power the most complete and effectual weapon the people have to hold government accountable. It was designed to force compromise, not to let one branch starve the others into submission. But now, executive pressure tactics are blurring those lines. Law cabins that power for a reason. The Impoundment Control Act and Supreme Court cases like Train v. City of New York say the president can't withhold or delay funds Congress has lawfully appropriated. So if Congress holds the purse, but the president controls when and how to squeeze it, who's really in charge? Now let's shift west and south to Texas. A new congressional map passed mid-decade is headed for emergency hearings this week in El Paso. Plaintiffs say it dilutes the voting power of minority communities in violation of the Voting Rights Act. Texas argues it's just partisan line drawing. And under current precedent, that's allowed. In 2019, the Supreme Court ruled that federal courts can't stop partisan gerrymandering. But racial gerrymandering? That's still justiciable. And recent rulings like Allen v. Milligan confirmed that. So this case isn't just about Texas. It's about whether courts can still police the line between lawful politics and unconstitutional discrimination. Here's what ties both of these stories together. They're both about representation. One asks, can a government function when Congress and the White House weaponize the budget? The other asks, can an election be fair if the map decides the outcome? In 1792, George Washington vetoed a bill because he thought it unfairly apportioned congressional seats. It was the very first presidential veto. Because even back then, they knew if you lose fairness in representation, you lose consent of the governed. And if you lose that, you lose the republic. So here we are in 2025. Congress hasn't enacted FY 2026 appropriations. Texas's map is under challenge, and people are wondering whether any of this still belongs to them. So let me ask you, which failure cuts deeper? A government that shuts down, or one where your vote doesn't count? And what would it take to fix both? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and let's talk about what comes next.